This is the Work at Home Heroes podcast. Your host, Caitlin Pyle, digs deep with people from all over the world who make money from home. Get ready to wake up to a world of possibility for freedom, flexibility, and a life you'll love.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of the Work at Home Heroes podcast. I'm here with Blaine Bristol, and she does social media marketing specifically for commercial real estate. She's been working at home for just over 2 years now. We're going to get into how she got started, why she picked commercial real estate. And I just want to say I'm super excited to talk to somebody who has really niched down, because I'm always yelling at you guys like a broken record that you've got to pick a niche. And so we're going to talk to Blaine about niching down and how she got into what she's doing. And she's joining us from Dallas, Texas today. Welcome to the show, Blaine.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So let's dig into your background. How did you get started doing social media for commercial real estate?
Gosh, it is such a long story, so I'll try to do the fastest version. The short of it is my dad and my mom and pretty much everybody in my family have always done commercial real estate my whole childhood. In fact, their Friday night date was dragging me in the back of the car and going around looking at property, and they just loved it, and I thought it was horrible, so boring. But, you know, I'm a classically trained opera singer and pursued that for a really long time. And I'm actually still pretty good, but it's a very expensive career to pursue. And the hours are really strange. You know, you need to sing maybe in the middle of the day to practice, but your rehearsals and everything are late at night. So you kind of have to find a pretty unique job to be able to pay the bills at home and then start pursuing your career singing. And you know, after the crash, it just was not feasible for me or my family to pursue it. And I got married very young. We were 22 and he was in the Army and I was still in school and nothing was really working out. So I had to stop singing and began working in retail. And even though it was really a great training experience for sales, especially high end, because I got to work with Neiman Marcus, which was fantastic, very high stress, very competitive, excellent training. But I hated showing up every day just to be a cog in the machine. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point where I was in between working for different retailers and looking for the next job and really dreading it. My dad called me to go have a beer one day and mentioned a client that he had that had a few small bookstores that wondered what kind of marketing his firm provided. And the answer was none. And my mind was blown because commercial real estate is usually about a $5 billion industry a year just here in Dallas. So internationally, I couldn't even begin to guess, maybe up in the 200s of billions of dollars.
Wow.
So I started looking into it and realized that no one was selling or advertising or marketing commercial real estate properties on social media. I mean, there's a few blips in Miami and New York where smaller companies and firms are posting their properties, but it's mostly like bland aerial views that would mean nothing if you didn't know what you were looking at, or warehouse spaces that really aren't that eye-catching when, you know, everybody's always loved looking at skyscrapers or the Coliseum since the dawn of time. So I started pursuing this basically as an avenue to help my dad. And then I realized that there's a huge need for this all over the country. So here I am with my very specific niche, and that's exactly what we do. And we're digital marketing and advertising. You know, we don't do any physical. We are capable to do it, but we're really trying to make sure that we represent commercial real estate in the new era. And they're very heavy in physical marketing. So we make a really solid effort to really push them to be into the digital age.
Wow. Yeah. So it sounds like the commercial real estate niche or industry was really in the dark ages, and you're pushing them into like, hey, this is the 21st century, people. We're like a decade into it. And you're like, actually, we're a decade and 8 years into it. Oh my goodness, time flies. And you're a pioneer and you saw that need. I think it's hilarious. And I love it that you are now working in the niche or the industry that you are kind of dragged into by your parents. And I was laughing about that the other day about how I really wanted to go rug shopping for my new house with my mom. And I remember going rug shopping with my mom when I was a kid. And I was like, I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. So payback time, Mom. It's coming soon. We're going rug shopping. So that's amazing. And let's talk about your corporate life before you got into doing what you're doing. What was that like for you?
Like I said, like coming in and working really, really hard for someone else's dream.
Yep.
I don't think that was ever going to be my path.
Yeah.
And no offense to it. None whatsoever.
Some people love it. Some people thrive on it. I can totally identify with the statement of not wanting to show up and just be a cog in the wheel. And I felt like I was being used. And just the fact that I had to show up for the best hours of my day between 8 and 5, and that I was exhausted afterwards and I didn't feel like doing anything for me, it's just not a good fit. But some people thrive in that environment. And so, yeah, I agree with you. No hating on the people who love it. Blaine, and I don't mean any offense to those of you listening at home and they're like, I love selling stuff at Neiman Marcus or whatever. Like, we're not hating on you at all. But we know there's people out there that are just nodding their heads right along with us right now. Yeah. And so you had the idea when you were having a beer with your dad, right?
Yeah. I mean, we were in the Londoner down the street. I literally just pulled up my phone. I go, sure, there's ways to market. I had studied general marketing in college, but since you just mentioned that 18 years into it thing, I won't go too far in how long college was. Facebook did exist, but Instagram did not. So studying marketing was a totally different world than it is now. So we are a team of, here's my favorite word in the world, autodidacts, which means we are self-taught. They weren't teaching you how to optimize LinkedIn. They weren't teaching you how to optimize Instagram. And they weren't teaching you how to optimize Snapchat. Snapchat's making a really big play right now, but there was definitely a need for it. I couldn't believe that, searching hashtags in Instagram, I wasn't finding office space. I wasn't finding slabs. I wasn't finding floor plans. I wasn't finding anything like that. I wasn't even finding general commercial real estate, except of course, a little bit in New York. And even then, it's a full-time job. Being active and consistent with great content on social media is a full-time job. That's pretty much the point where everybody's reaching. They all know that they need it because people keep talking about it. They're just not sure why yet. And so that's where we come in. And, this job, doing this for me, I feel so passionately about it, which sounds cheesy. I'm so passionate about posting online for commercial real estate. Some days it's really hard. Like, I wake up at the crack of dawn. My husband gets up really early. He's former military, now super corporate. He loves it. And he's the dorkiest guy ever. I love him to death. I wake up with him. It's like 5 o'clock, still dark out. We're taking care of the dogs. That 5 o'clock at night, he's home. I'm still working. He'll go to sleep. I'm working till 4 a.m. Like, when I filled out this questionnaire for you, it was 2 or 3 a.m. And
wow,
I've never done that for someone else's dream. I just couldn't have done it.
I love it. I can totally relate. Let's talk about your husband a little bit. Like, what was it like when you were getting started working at home and you were transitioning out? Was he excited for you? Was he skeptical? Was he nervous? What was that like?
Honestly, he's such a consistent person. He's just like the rock and I roll, like, he sits still and I do whatever. And he knew that when he married me. I think we met and married in 45 days.
Wow.
We just had our 7th year anniversary. So he knew when he first met me, he was like, yeah, you're it. And it took me a full year and a half, even though we'd been married for most of it, to be like, yeah, all right, this wasn't a huge mistake. I actually really love this guy. So being in the Army, and now he's corporate insurance in downtown Dallas, and he really loves it. He's just so consistent, and he's always known that I was going to dance around him, whether it was going to be singing or creating something. I think he knew. So he wasn't too shocked when I was like, I'm going to do this. He goes, well, that makes perfect sense. Go.
You got to love men like that. And my husband's a lot the same. We're also approaching our 7-year wedding anniversary. And I have also described him as a rock. And I have to think that living with me is like living with a wild animal, because he just never knows what I'm going to do, say, or, lash out about next. And just with how stressful my work is, he does keep me sane, and I kind of give him a hard time because, like, my productivity levels comparison to his are through the roof, but that's not a bad thing because he has that ability to, like, calm me down. And, like, I can imagine being married to somebody like me, but he's doing it, and, like, he's a saint, and so it sounds like your husband's a lot the same. He's just kind of he likes that excitement of living with somebody who rolls instead of, acts as the rock. We're kind of flighty. We're kind of crazy. We do what we want to do when we want to do it. And yeah, so I think that's great. And it sounds like you guys have a great setup. And you're a lot happier now working at home, yeah?
Absolutely. I mean, he's the happiest person in the world. Honestly, I'm married to a Labrador. But you can see me for everything you were saying. I'm nodding along. Yes, that's exactly right. But he would come home. Oh my gosh. And for maybe nothing, I might tear him a new one. Babe, when you're listening to this, I apologize. I mean, he would just come in, and there'd be some days, and when you're working at home, you have the same problem as when you're working at a job you hate. You're home maybe on your day off, particularly in retail, because I would have like a Tuesday off, right? And he'd come home from work, being in the Army, he'd be at work for 12, 14 hours, and he'd come home, and I'd still be in my pajamas from the night before, like on the couch, like a bowl full of popcorn in front of my face and like a glass of wine. What did you get done today? And I was like, nothing. And I didn't really realize it, but I was probably pretty depressed. I didn't feel depressed because I was active when I had to be. But on my days off, I was just miserable, dreading having to go back to work the next day. And so he'd come in, maybe hoping to have dinner, or maybe he had a good day. And I'd just be sitting there, like sipping my glass of wine, like looking at him, like, what do you want?
Oh,
Yeah. So I would say now when he comes in, that very rarely happens unless I'm really kind of struggling with something business wise that's really put me into a challenging place, which I do try to leave the house now. So when he comes home, I'm working at a coffee shop suffering. So he doesn't come home and see me suffering, and I kind of can pull him down with me. So I try really hard to check it at the door now. That's a really big effort that I made for us. And, being social media, I really make sure to keep my phone in my bag when we're at restaurants or anything like that, because it's so easy to pick up your phone and check your email and how's my ad running, and oh my gosh, is this post tracking? And then all of a sudden he's sitting there and he's eaten finished dinner and he's looking at me and I haven't touched my food. And I don't want him to run away screaming that I'm the worst wife ever. So
I could probably take some of that advice, especially we just did the launch of Work at Home School at the time of this recording. We just wrapped it up a little over a week ago. And oh my gosh, Ben, my husband, was like, I'm so glad to have my wife back. But now I'm a little bit reclusive, like not wanting to do anything because I just spent so much time being on. And so, gosh, our husbands are saints. And in your application, you mentioned, taking a mini vacation. I think that's great advice. You can just take time when you need to take time off. I think that's like the best part about working at home. And even you mentioned that you're making less money now, but you're so much happier. And that means the world, I think. And speaking of money, I know that people are curious, what kind of money are you generating? What kind of hours are you working to generate that income?
Gosh, I hope none of my clients hear this. So sometimes, I can maybe put in 20 hours a week and make $1,000. Sometimes I'm putting in 80 hours a week and making $500. It really depends on the project that's currently happening. If it's a bigger video edit, photo edit, mass, if we're creating a digital walkthrough or a pre-visualization, that takes hours and hours and hours. And you're in pajamas for days in the dark, working on your computer quietly, like painting yourself into a corner until it's finished. And that's when the cost versus effort is very high. Those projects can get pretty pricey and they take 5 to 6 weeks to put together. And then there's being a consistent poster. That's a lot less time effort, but the price value is also really high. If I'm doing a digital design, I might really average $1 an hour. But if I'm doing social media, I might average $100 an hour, which, is preferable for my time. But generally speaking, on average, I pull in about $1,000 to $2,000 a month, which isn't huge. But when these big projects come in, my team and I can pull in a pretty big chunk of change. And I always try to pay them first because a lot of these people that I've recruited are really in for the dream and they all wanted to work at home too. So we're all 1099 in my business and man, they're great. And they've worked a lot on spec for me. So I really try to reimburse them as quickly as possible and make sure that their lives are going a little bit more smoothly because it's not their baby, even though they're invested in it.
Yeah, and you're helping them be able to work at home as well. And I think that's a key point too, is that you can work as a team. And I think as your business grows, you're going to be able to raise your prices. You're going to be able to, outsource more and free up more time so you can focus on maybe doing some more marketing and then building the team. And then before you know it, your business is going to be through the roof. And you're in year 2 and doing this well already. I think that's amazing. And $1,500, $2,000 a month, that's life-changing money for many people that are listening to this right now. That's like a full-time income for them. And so many emails come in on a daily basis. They're like, Caitlin, I just want to make an extra $500 a month. Is that possible? I'm like, yeah, it's possible. And that's one reason I started this podcast. What was it like when you were making that transition from, doing the corporate retail, maybe in your opera singing friend circles, whatnot? Did you have to deal with any unsolicited feedback? Were people envious? Were they skeptical? And if so, how did you navigate that?
There wasn't too much feedback from the opera quote unquote friend group because there's just not a whole lot of community in that. It's so competitive. Opera singers are out here listening. If they're listening, they completely disagree with me. I'm so glad that you disagree. But I've always experienced being very private in that world. So there wasn't too much backlash from that. Particularly the people that were a little bit older in my life had a very strong feeling about me not earning a salary, which is understandable. How could they possibly conceive that doing something completely untangible creates untangible money. I don't ever go up to a client and they put cash in my hand. I don't ever go up to a client and put a product in their hand. I do all their stuff online. They pay me online. So how could they possibly see any scalability to this? But yes, the people who were older in my life were really unsupportive. They thought I was doing a great disservice to my family, to my husband who works so hard at a very normal, he's recession proof, military and then insurance. He's not going anywhere. They wanted me to follow that same path. But I think now that they're seeing that this is something that is feasible, even if they don't understand it, they're a little bit more supportive. Do they wish that I had become a lawyer, was making tons of money? I'm sure. But once again, being somewhere on time all the time is pretty much the hardest thing in the world for me.
Yep, I agree. Just getting there. I mean, the work might be fun and stuff. And you said you didn't hate doing the retail stuff and the training was great and stuff, but just having to be there, having to show up at the same time every day when somebody else wanted you to be there, that's the hard part. And I can totally relate to having the same kind of feedback. It was coming from people that are older, that they've worked the same job for 40 years. That's what you did, it wasn't about the money you made. It was the money that you saved. And what about retirement? What about this? And so my husband's parents have been consistently encouraging him to, work the same job, climb the corporate ladder, get that, incremental raise every year. And that worked for them. But that's not the world we live in anymore. Nobody works for the same company for 40 years. We create our own companies. And Blaine, I have every reason to believe, you mentioned, maybe they would rather you work as a lawyer, make tons of money. Doing what you're doing right now and continuing to build your business, building systems and really hacking into this commercial real estate market the way you've been doing, I have every reason to believe that you're going to make more money than a lawyer and be happier because of it. And so, especially if you keep going the way you're going now. So that's what I think. I know that I grew my business to make a lot more money than both my husband's parents did when he was growing up and stuff. And so we just kind of blew their minds. And so I have every reason to believe that you're going to do the exact same thing. And I love that you've continued to build your business despite what these other people had said to you. And I think that the more you do that, the more successful you get and the more results you get for your clients, they're going to be like, okay, yeah, we get it. And they'll leave you alone after a while if they've been consistent and annoying you about that. And that's exactly what happened in my situation as well. After a while, they're like, okay, well, I guess that, a lot of their concerns were, what if you run out of people who are interested in what you have to say and, and all this stuff, in regards to the blog and whatnot. And that just hasn't happened. It's just continued to grow because we've been very consistent with it. And there's just not a shortage of opportunity. And that's what we say in the Work at Home Heroes community is that as long as there are people with problems that you have the skills to solve, there will always be opportunity, ever increasing. And especially there's no place more true than in commercial real estate, especially now. What I know from you, I didn't know that there wasn't any social media going on in that niche. And so I think that you're sitting on a gold mine, Blaine. I could keep going for hours and hours about how excited I am for you, but I got to have you answer the rest of my questions or my audience will be mad at me. So we want to know about your typical morning routine. What does it look like now that you're in charge when you wake up in the morning?
I'm the least routine person ever. Yay!
Me too.
So if you're listening to this, congratulations. You don't have to have a routine. You can still be at least moderately successful for now. So this morning I got up and like I told you before this started, I was paranoid about the time zones. I have screwed up time zones so many times. And even though I keep checking it, okay, I am in Central. I know I am. But what about daylight savings? I don't know where they're calling from. Anyway, I'm sure there's an application out there that I need to be using for it. But I got up early. I made myself a big old cup of bulletproof coffee because I just finished Whole30 in January and I'm kind of like obsessed with this coffee now. So, and by a big cup, I mean really an obnoxiously large cup of coffee, and I might have 2 in a day. But anyway, so I did that and let the dogs out and brushed my teeth, and I'm still in my pajamas and got back in bed and was reading over the questions that I sent you. So I knew that I wouldn't make a fool of myself. And that was this morning. Yesterday morning, I had a huge meeting up at the crack of dawn, dressed and ready to go, dressed to the nines, like not like a normal makeup day, like a very serious high heels and very business professional. Had to be all the way in downtown Dallas, navigating the traffic. Extremely long day, didn't get home till 8. Life's all about balance. After this, I probably will check my emails and go run errands, personal for me errands. Those are the hardest to get into my schedule because I put those off to the very last minute. For example, I still have Christmas gifts in my car waiting to be mailed. But there's no routine except maybe the first thing I do if I make sure I have enough time to get up and make a cup of coffee. That's pretty much the extent of it.
I love it. And I really appreciate your transparency, Blaine, about not having a routine. And it's a question that, I get interviewed on podcasts quite a bit, and they all want to know, what's your secret to being productive? And I'm like, I don't have one. And that's my secret. It's like, I do my own thing. I do the thing that works for me, and I'm flexible with myself. And I know that there's people that just thrive with routine, and that's probably more of the mainstream thing. And I know that I'm somewhat of a rare bird. I would describe myself as a rebel. And if you've heard of Gretchen Rubin and the 4 tendencies and her happiness project and stuff, if not, you should definitely look it up. I've mentioned it on podcasts before. You kind of figure out how you respond to expectations. And it's a very small sliver of your personality, the 4 tendencies. And I took the quiz online, 4 tendencies quiz with Gretchen Rubin, and I got rebel, which is a very small portion of the population has this tendency to how they respond to expectations. And that's why I can't stick to workout programs. I can't stick to diets. I can't do anything that others expect of me or that I expect of myself. They have to be, the things that I do have to align with like who I want to be as a person. And so it's all identity based. And so it's like, okay, if I don't want to be a lazy bum today, then how am I going to make that not happen? And so it's not about, hey, what's on the plan for today? What's on the schedule? If I don't want to do it, I'm not going to do it. If it's not something that aligns with my goals or the person I want to become in the next 12 months or whatever, then I have a very, very hard time doing it. And so figuring out who you are as a person, how you respond to expectations, I encourage anybody listening to this right now to figure that out, because once you know how you respond to expectations from yourself and from others, then you can work with that. And it's a great way to strategize, and you know where your strengths and weaknesses are as well. So I know why I've never been able to stick with workout programs. I know why none of that stuff works for me now. And so I can figure out what does. So yeah, I can relate to you a lot in that regard, Blaine. It sounds like we're birds of a feather, and it's true. You do not have to have a routine to be successful, especially if you've got other people who do have routines helping you out. They can keep you on track. And that's the way we work at the podcast too. We have Talia. She's our community manager in the Work at Home Heroes Facebook group. She is also my podcast assistant. She tells me when to show up, and I show up, and she keeps me on track. So we work with each other to be productive sometimes. And I think that's the great thing about working at home, is that you can build these teams, or like what you're building in your business, Blaine. So you don't have to do everything yourself. And I think that's so, so key. When you first start out, yeah, you're going to be by yourself, but then you can hire some help and you can scale things up. And yeah, what's next for you, Blaine? Do you have measures in place to make sure that your business is growing, or are you happy with where you are?
We're definitely in the growing phase.
Excellent. I love it.
Yeah, I'm not hitting the brakes anytime soon. No one's thought more about this business than I have over the past 2 years. Yeah, the next steps are, first things first, I think we're going to probably get a second rendering computer so we can do more rendering jobs, because those jobs start at $25,000 a pop.
Wow.
Yeah. So those really bring in a lot of money, and they're so beautiful. And everybody that we work with, that I work with, everybody's an artist in some form or fashion. Now, I can't really draw or sketch to save my life, but I do have an artistic mind from years of singing. And these people that I work with, oh my gosh, they can create anything that you would want. The only thing that slows them down is usually the equipment. So I think the next big step is getting the really serious computer. We have everybody has their own good computers, but I think we're going to get a big team one, and that's starting at $10,000. That's a huge investment, but we don't technically have any overhead really. We all work from home. We go meet at the main guy with the main computer if we have a meeting, in his house with his kid running around. So that's the next step. But from there, I want 5 computers from that point.
And it sounds like from one job, the computer would pay for itself, or more than pay for itself. If each job is $25,000 and the computer is $10,000, you could do 2 jobs and pay for 2 computers or 5 computers. You can have those 5 computers. So I love it. Last question, because we're running out of time. I want to make sure that this one gets answered. I asked it to everybody who comes on the show, because people listen to these stories and like, yeah, that worked for Blaine, or that worked for Caitlin, or it worked for whomever that we're talking to at the time. But it's not going to work for me, like for X, Y, and Z reason. I'm so scared to get started, and this makes sense, but blah, 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 blah. Like these different excuses. What advice would you give to someone who wants to work at home, but they're listening to you right now and they're just so scared to get started? What would you say to give them that little kick in the butt?
Well, the first thing that I did was I went and found a job for someone else doing this, making nothing. That way I could absorb everything, and they were paying me to do it. And, maybe that job didn't even last 6 months, which was fine. I didn't want it to last a long time, but it gave me the confidence to go out and start running ads and promoting my own social media campaigns that I needed to be able to make sure I could really run at a very high expensive level. So if you're kind of feeling paranoid in your 9 to 5, you can't give it up, maybe go find a job that doesn't pay quite as well and go learn. But other than that, I know it's going to be such a person to person thing. I can't give advice that is blanket. I don't think anybody can.
Right.
If you even have an inkling of an idea, maybe set some time aside and just execute. Execute studying, execute learning, execute. Like that's the only real advice that I can give to anybody out there who's a little nervous. Pick that big goal, pick that little goal, and just execute on it. We're really big here, Beyond Bridges Social, about self-teaching. We spend more time teaching ourselves and learning amongst each other than we do pretty much anything else. R&D is the biggest hub of what we do. Even though we're all technically experts in it, you cannot stop learning, especially if you want to go into a digital anything at all. Everything's changing all the time. We read all the time. That's the best way we can get our job done. So if you have a feeling, if you have something you want to learn about, set that time aside, execute getting done what you want to get done for yourself. Doesn't matter how small. Okay, I want to get up and I want to study for 15 minutes. Great, get it done. That's the only thing that I can say over and over again. People say work hard, work hard, work hard. I think that's the worst advice I've ever heard.
Yeah. What does that even mean? Work hard, that's so vague and that could mean whatever you want it to mean, but you've got to take specific action on your goals. And I always like to say, you don't get traction without action. You don't get momentum without movement. It's a law of physics. And I don't know what the name of the law is. I'm not a math or science person, but I know that you cannot get momentum unless something is moving, unless you are moving. And so the people that are sitting at home right now, they're thinking, hey, I am not going to do anything until I feel confident. You are shooting yourself in the foot, literally, because without moving, without doing the thing that you want to do, without learning, you're not going to change anything. You've got to do something different to get different results. You can't continue doing what you've been doing, hoping, wishing, thinking, praying. All passive strategies, they're strategies, but they're not good strategies. You've got to take action, just like what you said, Blaine. And I just want to thank you so much. We are out of time. I want to thank you so much for being on the show. And I know that there's people that have got questions for you about how you get started that we didn't answer in this podcast. So where can people reach you?
You can come check out our website, Beyond Bridges Social. I know it's a mouthful, but we're there. It's a big old bridge. You can't miss it. And my email is Blaine. I'm sure you'll see the spelling of my name, BLAYNE at beyondbridgessocial.com. Feel free to reach out and ask any questions. And if y'all are local, if you're in Dallas, you want to go grab a cup of coffee, shoot me an email. We do that all the time.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being on the show, Blaine.
Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure.
Well, thanks again for listening, everyone. I hope you got some value from this episode. There will be links in the show notes. As always, feel free to join our Work at Home Heroes Facebook community where we discuss all the episodes in a dedicated thread. If you found this episode useful or any of the past episodes, I'd love it if you would leave us a review. It will help us reach more people with our message and keep bringing you these success stories. Talk to you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Work at Home Heroes podcast with Caitlin Pyle. Be sure to listen to previous episodes at caitlinpyle.co/podcast. While you're there, read the show notes and check out all the great links and resources mentioned in this episode and more. You can also subscribe to the Work at Home Heroes podcast so you'll automatically be notified when our next episode is available. Remember, as Caitlin says, mo skills means mo money.